So Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. I'll be reading now the NIV. And it says this. It says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Okay, so what happens in times of transition and times of change, and it kind of goes along with this morning, everybody here is at some place in your life is in a season of, or a time of change, a time of transition, right? It might be a small transition. It might be a job change, which sometimes is a big transition. It might be something small, but there's changes that's happening in our lives at all times. And how many know that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Because if you think about it, you think about when we come to Christ, right? We receive Christ, we become a follower of Christ. From that moment, that is the moment where we become transformed, which is radically changed, right? But are any of you the same way you were on that day? No. Why? Or why not? Because God is continuing to change you, to transform you into his image. So change is part of life. It's a part of the Christian life. But there are external things that happen that's change or transition. I recently, in case you're wondering, had a couple really big transitions in my life, right? And they're not all bad. Moving to Florida was a good transition, especially when it's going to be in the 60s, right? And it's 95 here. That's a good transition when you get tired of the cold. But then there are other transitions that are not so good. That's been rough. It's been difficult. That's still going through. And so all of us are in a season of transition in one part of our life, one area of our life. Some of us may be going through a lot of transitions in our life right now, where I'm at. And that's good because God has a word for us tonight. So we're going to go back to 2 Chronicles. Now you can find that by going to 1 Chronicles and then skipping ahead and skipping to 2 Chronicles. Does that help? Okay. There's no 3 Chronicles, so it's just 1st. So you go to 2 Chronicles. I'm going to tell most of the story. I'm not going to read a lot of it. I'm going to tell most of the story because I'm not going to read through 5 chapters unless you want me to. Okay, that was good. That was good. You're silent that time. So here's the background. The story is about Judah, which is the southern kingdom. When the kingdom split, right after Solomon, the kingdom split, and Judah is the southern kingdom. Two of the tribes became the southern kingdom, and the story of the kings, right, in both. The northern kingdom, which was Israel, and the southern kingdom, which was Judah, was good king, bad king, right? Good king, bad king, good king, bad king, bad king, really bad king, really good king, bad king, right? And that was kind of like we see in America with our politicians, right? Good politician, bad politician, bad politician, bad politician, bad politician, bad politician, bad, not bad people, but bad policy, right? And so we kind of get that idea here lately with our political issues. So we see that. So at this point, we get to 2 Chronicles chapter 17, which is where the story picks up. And Asa had been a king. Now, Asa had done some good things, but Asa was considered a really bad king. Okay, he was bad for a long time, did a couple of good things, and the Bible mentions that, and then he ended up a bad king. So Asa has a son, and that's the guy we're going to concentrate on tonight. His name was Jehoshaphat. Now, Jehoshaphat, in 2 Chronicles chapter 17, he becomes a king, and it says that God blesses him. In fact, it says in chapter 17, verse 3, that the Lord was with Jehoshaphat. How many know that's a good thing? Right? Because it's like this. It's like, I want people to say, when they talk about me, they say, and you know that Stan guy, the Lord is with him. Right? Isn't that good? I mean, isn't that a good thing to say, is the Lord is with us, the Lord is with me? Especially when we see that we're going through a season of transition, we're going through a time of change. It's always good to know that the Lord is with us in that time of transition, that time of change. Okay, so then what happened was, the reason that God was with him was because it said the fear of the Lord fell on all the kingdoms in verse 10 of the land surrounding Judah. And then we get to chapter 19, we find out why. Because Jehoshaphat didn't follow in the ways of his father, but he brought about some great reforms. They were both reforms in how they took care of people, but also in spiritual reforms. So Jehoshaphat became a king who took care of the nation spiritually and was known as a good king. And so what happens is when all the nations around knew that God was with Jehoshaphat, so for a while, right, at least 2 chapters, the enemies of Israel, of Judah, kind of stayed back. But how many know that the enemy is always prowling, right? The enemy is always looking for our weakness. The enemy is always coming after us. He's always formulating a plan to come against the followers of God, right? You know that. You know that. And it's one of these things that if everything's going great in your life, watch out. Because the devil is always looking for a weakness, always looking for a way to attack, always looking for a way to come against us. Okay, so he never stops. He never ceases. The enemy never ceases. But the thing that we know about this is the God we serve is greater than the one who's against us, right? Greater is he that is in us than the one that's in the world. And so we know that God is with us. So we get to 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Okay, and that's where the story takes place in 2 Chronicles chapter 20 that we're going to hit on tonight. Because what happens is we get I got to get here real quick. In chapter 20, verse 1, what we find, it says this. It says, after this. So after Jehoshaphat had brought the reforms to Judah, and had brought the spiritual reforms, and the enemy was not happy about that. And so after this, so understand, that's the first, there's a key to this. After this, understand this, that the enemy is always coming after us. And a lot of times it happens after this. Whenever there's a season of good things that happen in your life, because God gives blessings, God answers prayer, God does all these great things, and then there's a season of after this. Right after this, that the enemy is going to come. We see in chapter 20, verse 1, we see that there were the Moabites, the Ammonites, and some of the Meunites. Now, I'm not sure why only some of them showed up, but only some of them, right? But anyways, there's 3 nations that decide to join together, or 2.5, depending on how many Meunites there are, right? And so they decide to come against Jehoshaphat in spite of the fact that the Lord was with Jehoshaphat. Because listen, the enemy is going to come after you whether knowing that God's on your side. He's still coming after you. Amen? I mean, we know that God's on our side. We know that greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world, but the enemy still comes after us. And he comes after us and he attacks us. And the enemy is always out to destroy us, always out to destroy our family, always out to destroy our church. Listen, God's doing great things here. What do you think is going to happen? The enemy's going to sit back and go, oh, we lost that one. No. When God is doing great things, the enemy is going to attack. The enemy's like a snake trying to get in there to attack, trying to come against the families of church, try to bring disunity, trying to bring all these kind of fears, things on what's going to happen. Oh, things are changing. Oh, man, Listen, man, God is doing a work. And we've got to stay focused on what God's doing because we know the enemy is going to come after us. And that's okay. That's okay. We know that. The enemy is always trying to undo the good that God is doing. The enemy is always trying to undo the good that God is doing. So we have to understand that. We have to understand that the enemy will gang up on us. The enemy will gang up on us. The Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Meunites will gang up on the followers of God, right? That's going to happen, and we have to understand that. So what happens next? So we read down a little further in verse 3 and 4 of chapter 20, and it says this. It says that alarmed Jehoshaphat, when he found out they were coming against him, alarmed, it says, Jehoshaphat resolved to inquire of the Lord, and he proclaimed a fast for all Judah. The people of Judah came together to seek help from the Lord. Indeed, they came from every town in Judah to seek help. So understand this, that when the enemy comes, when we're in times of transition, time of change, because remember, he is leading Judah from the evil that his father Asa had led them into, the idol worship and all these other things, was transitioning them into a season of following God. The enemy has come against him, and now what happens? This is important to know. The first thing Jehoshaphat did was seek God. Prayer. The first thing Jehoshaphat did was inquire of the Lord. How many of you know that the first place we need to go is to God in prayer? Right? We need to, what's that old hymn says? Take it to the Lord in prayer. That's the first place. Now let me tell you something, because I want to make this clear. We can't wait until the enemy attacks us to pray. We have to already be in an attitude of prayer during the good times and the bad times. Sometimes when things are going great, it's not that we forget what God's done. It's not that it's easier to kind of slough off on those things because everything's going great. But I say when things are going well, that's when we need to get to our knees. That should drive us to our knees as much as when things start going sideways or going backwards or going wrong. But if we have already developed a prayer life, already developed a time where we are alone with God, then when the enemy attacks, we're already ready. And then I want to tell you this, go to God. God spoke to me in January this year. I already was prayer. My father-in-law traveled around the world and spoke on prayer, wrote books on prayer, and he would drive you crazy because every time he'd see you, the first thing he'd say to you, did you pray today? And I'd be like, oh. Until finally I said, well, if I just get up and pray in the morning, then when he asked me, I'll say, yes, I did. And then what happens is you start falling in love with that time with God, and then nothing replaces that. Nothing is like that sweet hour of prayer, that time when we're on our knees in the presence of God. It's just me and him, right? And I listen to him, and he speaks to me, and he walks with me. It's like the child said that the Sunday school teacher said, does anybody know a name of God? He said, it's Andy. And he said, Andy, what do you mean? And he says, well, Andy walks with me, Andy talks with me, Andy tells me I'm his own. You know? I tell you, I'm a bad joke machine. And the best thing to do is just laugh, because if you don't, I'll keep telling them till you laugh. So help me out here. So Andy is always with us, walking with us and talking with us. We've got to develop an attitude of prayer so that when the enemy comes, we already know what to do. We already know what to do. Then what happens next? We skip down. It mentions the prayer there. He prays the prayer, and then we skip down to verse 12 at the end. It says, our God, will you not judge them? For we have no power to face this vast army that is attacking us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. First thing they did is went to God in prayer, right? And then the second thing, when you're in a season of change, what do we need to do? We realize this. Our eyes must be on him. Because here's what happened. Do you remember that guy named Peter? That one dude that followed Jesus? And they were out in a boat. Remember that story? And Jesus came walking on the water, and they thought it was a ghost, and it wasn't a ghost. And Peter says, if it's really you, then tell me to come out. Right? Give me permission to come out and walk on the water like you. And Jesus says, come on, Peter. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on water. When did he start to sink? When he took his eyes off Jesus. That means that if he would have kept his eyes on Jesus, right? Let's look at the story the other way. If Peter keeps his eyes on Jesus, he walks all the way out to Jesus, joins with Jesus, and they walk back to the boat together, right? We can assume that from the story because the only reason he sank is he took his eyes off Jesus. So when we're in times of seasons of change, seasons of transition, we've got to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. I'm like Lori when she shared this morning. In my seasons of change, especially this year at the beginning of January, after my fast, God went silent on me. I did a 7-day fast, and man, I had times of refreshing with God. I was feeling, oh man, God, and then the next day, my fast was over. I was thanking God, and God just shut the heavens. You ever had that in your life? It is zero fun when you don't hear from God. You're reading the Bible and nothing hits you. You're praying and nothing's there. It's like God's just not there. But he is there. And there was a reason why he was doing this. And I'll just be honest with you. I had a kidney stone. Anybody had a kidney stone? I don't wish a kidney stone on my worst enemy. And I don't even have any enemies. Because kidney stones are, it's no fun. So you don't want one. And if you want to, I'll describe it in detail after the service. And you'll be thankful you never had one. I've had 3. And so this one was the easiest of the 3, believe it or not. I'm crawling around on the floor because when you have a kidney stone, you can't walk because and I'm crawling around on the floor because God hadn't spoken to me. And I am telling God all about it. I'm letting him know. You ever been there? You ever been there? I'm just being honest with you. I'm letting God know that he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how I feel. He doesn't understand where I'm at while I'm crawling on the floor and writhing in pain. And at the end of the 7 days, God was silent. And on the 8th day, God spoke. And I felt like a fool. Because what he spoke to me. And the one thing what he said to me was, trust my plan. In other words, get your eyes on me. Stop thinking about everything else. Because when your eyes are on me, it's going to be okay. I said, okay, God. Now, I don't know about you, but I like to have information. I'm an information guy. Anybody information people? Because I know that the more information I have, the better equipped I am to make decisions, the better equipped I am to do things in life, right? So I like to have a lot of facts, a lot of those things. And God says, too bad. In this case, trust my plan. And the first part of that plan was being here, which I didn't know at the time. The church wasn't even open at the time when God said that to me. But he kept saying to me, keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes, as the writer says, keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. So God took that time where I was telling him how to do things. I know you've probably never done that. I was telling him exactly. I was giving him a list of exactly what needed to be done, right? Here's what you need to do, God, to make things right. And God was like, my plan that I have for you is better than what you have planned. All those things you're telling me, that's okay. You wait to see what I'm going to do in your life. And it's been a fun ride. Amen? Anybody there? All right, trust God's plan. Keep our eyes fixed on him. And so what happens is this. After we keep our eyes fixed on this, and remember, the enemy is going to come after us. But it's like prayer. We have to develop in our life the habits and the patterns that always allow us to keep our eyes on Jesus so that when the bad times come, we already know where we're looking. So, which means we have to develop habits that will keep us focused on him, even in the good times. Because in the good times, it's easy to do. You know, we're praising God. But the next week when things aren't going so good, it depends where our eyes are. If our eyes are firmly focused on the problem, on the situation, or as my grandma would say, the situation, if our eyes are focused on what we need to do rather than on what Jesus wants us to do, so we have to develop that habit in our life that we keep our eyes focused on him. And then I like this part here. We skip down to verse 14. It says, then the Spirit of the Lord came on Jehaziel. And that's always a good thing, right, when the Spirit of the Lord comes on someone. If you're reading Scripture, so often we read Scripture, we go rote, right? We just kind of read it. And I'm the kind of person, when it has an exclamation point, I like to add the exclamation point. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes we read over Scripture and we just kind of gloss over things because we're getting our Bible reading in for the day, right? We're reading our chapter of the day or 6 chapters of the day, however we're doing it. But there's interesting little things that are thrown in there that are for our benefit that really explain the situation a little better. So it says this, then the Spirit, capital S, of the Lord came on Jehaziel. That's always a good sign. I mean, I want to hear from God. I want when someone speaks to me, I want them to know that the Spirit of the Lord's on them when they're speaking to me. The Spirit of the Lord came on Jehaziel, son of Zechariah, the son of Benaniah, the son of Jael, the son of Mattaniah, a Levite, the son of Asaph, and also this. I don't know why they gave all those names. Maybe the scribe who was writing this just said, hey, let's fill space. You know, I got my quota. Got to get 7 scriptures in here today. But all these people, and it doesn't matter because he was heard from God. That's all that matters. It says this. He said, listen, King Jehoshaphat, and all who live in Judah and Jerusalem, this is what the Lord says. Remember, there's 2.5 enemies because only half of the Meunites showed up. There's 2.5 enemies coming against one. So the situation's not good, and it's all because Jehoshaphat began to bring spiritual reforms to the nation. Because whenever God begins to move, the enemy's going to attack. Right? There are so many churches that are meeting today that the enemy's not coming against. You know why? Because they're not allowing God to move. So the enemy is going, we don't waste time with them. Let's go after the churches that are moving. Let's go after the churches that are going forward. Let's go after the churches that are leaving the buildings and going in their communities and telling people about Jesus and bringing people to Christ and witnessing and praying for people and bringing the word of God out there where the lost people are and the hurting people are and the broken are. Those who he's coming after. So now the prophet comes and says this. It says, listen, King Jehoshaphat, do not be afraid. I love that. In times of change, in times of transition, God wants you to know, don't be afraid, don't fear, don't be discouraged. But it's easy to. We're humans. Anybody here not human? One. Got a couple back? No, we're all good. We have feelings. You do realize that God gave us feelings and emotions. When I was angry with God, and I was mad, I was letting him know that what happened to my wife was I was not happy with that. I was angry. Do you know that God gave us the emotion of anger? I mean, he gave us those feelings. What we have to do is follow Scripture, which says to be angry, but do not sin. So when we're behind that person at the red light, and the red light turns green, we have to be angry and do not sin. We have to be careful how hard we beep the horn and for how long we be patient with them. We don't know what they're going through. So we have those feelings. We have to allow those feelings in our lives. It's okay to be emotional. I have a friend that, some of my friends were Baptist growing up. And it's okay. I prayed for them anyways. And they, go to church and they're like, well, we don't show emotions. And I'm like, are you kidding me? The one who created the heavens and earth, who brought new life to me, I'm supposed to stand in service and be unemotional about what he's done? Come on. I said, get serious about that. But we'll cheer when the Browns win, which isn't very often, by the way. We'll go crazy. But we come to church and we're unemotional. It's okay to be emotional. But it's like anything. It's what we do with those emotions, okay? And so here it comes to them, it says, so the emotion here is he says, do not be discouraged, which meant there's a reason why he's saying don't be afraid and discouraged, because obviously that's what the people were feeling. So acknowledge that we're feeling discouraged. It's okay to acknowledge that you're discouraged about something. It's okay to acknowledge that you have a little bit of fear, because the word of the Lord will come to you and say, hey, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. There's a reason for it. Look what he says. He says, because of this vast army, for the battle, ready? You're going to like this. The battle is not yours. What? But God, the Ammonites, the Moabites, and half the Meunites, they're right there. Do you not see them? And we've got our army here. What do you mean it's not the battle? What are you going to do? Come down from heaven and, send your angels and fire, A little bit of Elisha here, right? Call down fire from heaven. Sodom and Gomorrah, maybe? Turn them into pillars of salt? What do you mean the battle is not yours? It says, but it's God's. It says, tomorrow march down against them. They'll be climbing up by the pass of Ziz, which is a pretty cool place from what I've heard. And you will find them at the end of the gorge in the desert of Jurael. You will not have to fight this battle. Take up your positions, stand firm, and see the deliverance the Lord will give you. Did you hear what he said? The battle belongs to God. However, you are still to go and take up your positions. You are still to go and march out to meet the enemy, right? God's not just going to zap them like the bug zapper in the middle of summer, right? Zap, zap, zap. I love that sound, especially mosquito season. Zap. God is still requiring us in the midst of this to take up our armor, to take up our positions, to get ready to do battle. But remember, the battle is not ours. The spiritual battle belongs to God, but he's going to use us. God has reminded me many times in the few weeks I've been here. Many times he continues to say to me this is not about you. See what I'm doing? This is not about you. I'm going to use you. You are to take up your position. You are to march out in the battle, but this battle is not yours. This battle belongs to the Lord. And so understand that the battle belongs to God. The battle belongs to God. Because when God speaks, God knows what he's doing. But we're to take up our position. We are to stand firm. And then when we do that, watch the deliverance that God brings. How many love when God speaks? I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm going to pick this up so I don't keep stepping on it. So what happens is, at the end of my fast, when God went silent on me for 7 days, and 7 days feels like 100 years when God's silent. So I get in my car on Sunday morning. Okay, I believe this is a Sunday that Pastor announced his resignation. I didn't know anything about the church. I didn't know anything about what God was doing in my life other than God was silent. I get in my car. I'm going to go to church. I turn the car on. The radio's on. There's a preacher preaching, and I go, I don't want to hear a preacher preaching on the way to hear a preacher preaching. Anybody been there? I was like, oh, music. But what happened was, he said in his sermon, they were transitioning between pastors, and they'd been working together, and now he was becoming the pastor, and the other pastor was retiring, becoming pastor emeritus. And so what happened was, he said, those who wait on the Lord, he said, some translations say hope. He said, there is hope in the waiting. And I started crying because God had spoken to me. There's hope in the waiting. And God said to me, you're in a season of waiting. And there's hope in that waiting because the plan I have for you. And so he kept preaching. There were 3 things he said that I wrote down. One is to pray, but pray differently. Not just pray like you've been praying, but it's time to pray, be more specific, go deeper with God. God wants you to go deeper in your prayers. He said, I want you to begin to prepare for what I've called you to do, which I knew was pastor. Even though I was a painter, and I had been interim pastoring and helping churches, I was a painter. But even as a painter, I was a pastor because that's my heart. No matter what I do in life, no matter what I've done in life, I've always been a pastor. I just sometimes wasn't standing behind a pulpit, but I was in people's homes and delivering the good news to them. And then the third thing God said to me was, trust my plan, which drives me crazy. I'll be honest with you. Does it drive you crazy when God says, trust my plan? Because I say, what's the plan? But if I got up here today, I said, hey, here's the plan we're going to follow to help grow the church. What would your first thought be? What's the plan? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Trust me. That's what God does. Trust me. The difference is we know God and we can trust God because he's done it in the past. He can do it today, right? With me, it's just kind of like, let's hope this guy knows what he's talking about, right? So, that's what they're doing, laughing. And all the staff's going, yeah, we hope so too. And so God speaks. I love it when God speaks. I love it when God speaks. Because when God speaks, it's always clear. You know it, right? You know it. And you may be in a situation right now where you're trying to, you need to hear from God, and God's being silent. Maybe he's not being silent, but maybe you're not sure what he's saying. Listen. Pray. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus because he's going to speak to you. And when he speaks, you'll know it's him. Trust me. That guy on the radio, I don't even know what church it was in Louisville that he was preaching from. I don't have a clue. I tried to find out. I called the radio station. Hey, that guy, it's Sunday morning. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, he was preaching. He was in transition, and it's a church in Louisville. You don't know who is on your radio station at 10:45 on Sunday morning? No, I'm not sure what that is. We'll do some research. I don't know. God spoke to me. I know what I heard, right? I know what I heard. And then here I love this part. This is my favorite part of this story. Actually, I like all the parts of the story, right? And it's like every time you read a different story, it's like, that's my favorite story in the Bible. Anybody do that? That's my favorite scripture until tomorrow. And that's my favorite scripture. That's what I love about God. Okay, so then we go to the key 5. Okay, we go to verse 21. It says, early in the morning they left, and Jehoshaphat stood, listened, and he goes to verse 21. After consulting the people, Jehoshaphat appointed men to sing to the Lord and praise him for the splendor of his holiness. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So listen to the first thing he does. They pray. They ask God, our eyes are on you. We don't know what to do. Our eyes are on you. God speaks, says the battle is not yours, but it's God's. Here's what you're to do. And the first thing he does is he appoints men that are the praise and worship team. Right? He says, here's where we're going to go to battle. The Ammonites, the Moabites, and half of the Meunites, they're coming against us, and it's time to go to battle. We're going to take our positions. We're going to take our swords. We're going to take our staffs. We're going to go down and get ready for battle. And we're, okay, yeah, you're okay, but come on. And he gets this worship team together, a bunch of guys that are going to sing songs. Now, anybody ever been in the military? That's probably not how they did it with you, right? They didn't prepare you and say, we're going to train you for war, train you how to use guns, but before you go into battle, where's the choir? Come on, right? Come on. And then look what happens. Verse 21, it says, they appointed men to sing to the Lord and praise him for the splendor of his holiness as they went out at the head of the army. Now again, you got to pause here because you got to understand what's going on. You are one of those that has been appointed to sing, right? So you're standing there, mind your own business. You got your sword, your spear, you're the manly man, right? We're going to go to battle. Yes, we're going to take our positions. And Joshua calls you out and says, hey, second tenor, come on over here. And like, me? Oh, okay. And so you put your sword down, you walk up and say, what's going on? What's going on? He goes, we're going to sing songs to the Lord. Hey, that's great because as Jews, we love worshiping God. So we're going to sing praise and worship to God. We're going to sing God is good. And then Joshua gets them all together. Everybody tune up. Play everybody's key of C. Let's go. Sing right. And then they get ready to practice. They practice. And Joshua goes, now, everybody ready? And the army's, yeah, we're ready to go, right? This big scene like Lord of the Rings, right? This big scene. He's marching in front of them. We're going to go out to battle. The battle belongs to the Lord. We're going to march. We're going to take our swords. We're going to take our shields. We're going to go out, take our positions. And before we go, the choir is going to lead the way. Hallelujah. If you're a choir member, you're thinking, the Moabites and the Meunites, well, half of them, and the Ammonites, they're out there waiting to kill us. And Jehoshaphat is sending us out first. Don't you start with the guys with shields to protect us? I mean, come on, we got to think this is reality, right? This is spur of the moment. Jehoshaphat's, come on, choir, let's go. Lead the way, lead the way. So if you're one of them, you're like, well, okay, can we at least say goodbye to our family? Because you know what's going to happen when we got there and start singing to the other people. It says this, they went out the head of the army saying, give thanks to the Lord for his love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord. They were getting ready to go into battle, the choir leading the way, and they have hearts of gratitude. Give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever. And it says this, you ready for the conclusion? Okay, key 5 is faith without action is dead. When we're in times of change, in times of transition, when God speaks, we must act. When God says now's the time, now's the time. Right? When God said to me, when things opened up to come down here, God didn't say, well, we'll give it a few more months till you feel better about what's going on. Listen, I still don't understand a lot about what's going on in my life. I'm just being honest with you. But here's what I know. I'm okay with it because God's in control. And God doesn't have to show me. There's nothing in the Bible that says God has to show me and reveal to me all that he has planned for me. All it says is trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. God reveals his plan to us. He's been revealing parts to me, and some of them are pretty scary when I think about them. And in other things, I don't know this side of heaven that I'll ever fully understand. And you know what? I'm learning to say I'm okay with that too, because I know God. And I know that what he has planned for me is way better than anything I could plan. Right? And I have planned some things. Right? I make plans all the time. And I make pretty good plans too. And sometimes God says, no, that's a pretty good plan, but watch me. And I'll share this one last thing. When I was walking, I walk and talk. That's how I have conversations with God. So I put my headphones in, turn the music up real loud. I usually play one song, and like the one Trust in God, I'd play that I'd walk for an hour and 20 minutes, 5 to 6 miles, and the same song would play about 15 times. And one day I was walking and I was having a talk with God. I was letting God know my plans, and God was having a good laugh because, oh, those are your plans? That's pretty good. Just wait. And I was walking, and that song, it says, in every season, your grace has been enough. And the season I was in was not a good season. And it says, but I believe the best is yet to come. And I said to God, how can you say that to me? I had a wife who we were in ministry together. We were best friends. We did everything together. I've got 4 wonderful kids and 3 okay son-in-laws and 1 wonderful daughter-in-law. My son-in-laws are going to love that. And I've got the 3 of the greatest grandbabies. I got a new one coming this week. I got a new one coming in October. And they're the greatest thing that's ever happened. And I said to God, God, how can you say to me that the best is yet to come when I've had it so good? And God said, watch me. Now, I don't understand what that means. But I do know that if God says to me that the best is yet to come, I'm going to trust him. Because you know what that means? That the best is yet to come. And I don't have to understand all the whys and the who's and the what's and the whatever. I just need to know that the God who says the best is yet to come, when he says it, he means it. And he's going to bring it about. So what happens is this. The conclusion, you ready? It says, as they begin to sing and praise, the Lord. Remember who's the battle belong to? The Lord. There you go. The Lord set ambushes against the men of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir who were invading Judah, and they were defeated. The Ammonites and Moabites rose up against the men of Mount Seir to destroy and annihilate them. And after they finished slaughtering, so think about this. So you're out there and you're singing, give thanks to the Lord for his love endures for you. Give thanks to the Lord, and you're singing, and you probably have your eyes closed, kind of squinting to make sure you don't trip in the potholes or anything like that. And you're singing and worshiping God. And you're, kind of like we do sometimes Sunday morning when we're kind of, maybe things have us discouraged, or we're kind of down, but we want to praise God, but we're kind of one eye praising God. We're kind of, God, I really want to worship you, but I got all this stuff on me. I've got this load I'm bearing. I got this discouragement. I got this piles of things that's piled on my back, and I'm carrying this weight, and I really want to worship you. I really want to praise you. I really want to lift my arms to you, but I got all this stuff I'm carrying, right? And we do that. And what happened is, as they began walking out towards the enemy, they began to see the hand of God at work. And they began to, in a way, cast their burdens on Jesus because he cares for them. They begin to unload all these things that no longer worried them, like going into battle against the enemies that are trying to kill you, that have spears and rocks and sticks and stones, and you're just singing with the choir marching toward them. And they begin to see what God was doing. And so they begin to watch the Ammonites and Moabites join together and killed the Meunites from Mount Seir. And then it says after that, they began to go after each other. And it says, when the men of Judah, verse 24, came to the place that overlooks the desert and looked towards the vast army, they saw only dead bodies lying on the ground. No one had escaped. See, when God says, you don't have to fight this battle, you got to prepare to fight the battle. You got to take your position. You got to do all the things that God asks you to do, like pray, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, listen for the voice of God, then take action when God says to take action. But ultimately, the battle belongs to God. So much so that when God says the battle belongs to me, the battle belongs to him. Amen. And the armies were defeated. They were all laying there dead. Because God doesn't mess around, does he? God doesn't mess around. God's going to do what God said to do. Then to finish this way, it says in verse 29-30. The fear of God came on all the surrounding kingdoms. No kidding. Really? I didn't see that happening. Right? I say that, jokingly. When the kingdoms around heard what happened, that Jehoshaphat sent the choir out and the 3 armies killed each other, the fear of God came in all the kingdoms surrounding them. And it says that when they heard how God had fought against the enemies of Israel, and the kingdom of Jehoshaphat was at peace, for God had given him the rest on every side. See, God is in the battle with you. Whatever you're going through right now, whatever time of transition, whatever season you're in, whatever change is taking place in your life, understand this. God is right there with you. Nothing is surprising to him. He's like, oh, I forgot about it. Stan, sorry about that. I forgot about that. Let me try to fix it. That's not what God does. God is there with us. Sometimes God removes the situation, and sometimes God holds us in the midst of the situation. In this case, we see all that happening. God fought the battle. God was the one who fought the war. God was the one who did all that. But he had to walk them into the battle. He had to prepare them for the battle, to make sure they were ready for the battle, so that they could see God's hand in the battle. They could see what God's going to do. And then remember what God had done. So listen, times of transition, times of change, they can be difficult. Not always. Like I said, moving to Florida was not a difficult transition, other than missing my kids and my grandkids. But moving to Florida was a good thing, because it's hot and I like it hot. Anybody with me? No? So you're like, wait till summer. I can't wait till summer. I'm gonna get the nicest tan you've ever seen. I tan really well, by the way. And so you're gonna come in and say, wow, he's really, man, his arms are tan. And so I like that. But some transitions, some changes are difficult. They're not easy. And that's part of life, right? Change is part of life. Maturing, growing up is part of life. I don't know about you, sometimes for faint moments of my life, I wish I was young again. I mean, it's like a blur, and it's like, no, thank you. Remember those days, remember that? It's like, you ever wish you were a teenager again? Then you start thinking about being a teenager. You're like, oh my goodness, why would I want to go back to that? It was miserable then. It's miserable now. Sometimes change is difficult. Sometimes change and transition leaves us with a lot of questions. Listen, I have questions about what the things that have happened in my life, especially the last 3 or 4 years, and God has answered some of those, and some of those questions I will not have answered until I meet Jesus face to face. That's just the truth. And I have learned, because I have learned how good the goodness of God, and when Lori said this morning, I told her, I said, almost all the songs that they sang this morning were my wife's favorite songs. So I was having my cry fest over here, in case you're wondering. And so we sang at her funeral, the goodness of God, because she would always talk about this. She's laying in a hospital bed, not able to move very much, and she's apologizing to the nurses and telling them about Jesus while she's laying on death's door. And she was always, the song Gratitude, she was always singing, they played that song constantly, and she says, that's me. She says, I've got nothing to give God but a thankful heart. Sometimes we're going to have questions that are not going to get answered, and we have to learn to be okay with that. We have to learn to be okay with that. I don't know why he took my wife so young. I am learning to be okay with it, because I trust him. And I know what he has told me. The best is yet to come. And I could ruin that by sticking to this. But I'm not going to. I'm going to trust his plan. Trust his plan. Sometimes during times of change or transition, it's easy to lose focus. It's easy, and it happens. It happens to everybody. It happened to me. We lose focus on what is important. We lose focus, and our eyes come off of him. And it happens. We're human, right? When we get to heaven, guess what? We will never, ever lose focus on Jesus when we get to heaven. I can't wait to get to heaven. I do enjoy living, so I'm not in a hurry to get there, okay, just so you know. But I can't wait till we get there, because no more problems, no more limitations, no more insecurities, no more anything, no more pain, no more sin, no nothing. When we get to heaven, man, it's going to be great. It will be worth it all when we see Jesus, right? But while we're here, we have to learn to overcome. We have to learn to stick with keeping our eyes on Jesus and not losing focus on what God is doing, the big picture, what God is doing in our life. Go back to Galatians. Read that again. And it says this, for us in this season, let us not become weary in doing good. The enemy is always coming after you. He's always trying to stop you, always trying to stop what God is doing in your life, always bringing up your past. Anybody that bring up your past? Bringing up your past. Remind him of his future, right? When he tries to bring up your past. And he's always coming after us, always working on us. But let us not grow weary in doing good. Because listen, it says this, in the proper time. And that means God's time. My time, to me, always seems like the right time. And if God had done things my way, you wouldn't have me as your pastor. You'd be sad. I don't know why you're laughing at that one. You're supposed to say, amen, pastor, preach it. That was the point there. Let's try that one. We'll get it. If things had gone the way, if I look back at those when I'm crawling across the floor, telling God my plans, if things had gone the way I thought they should be, I would have made a miserable mess of my own life. So I thank God. At the proper time. Listen, hold on. It's kind of the old Pentecostal way when we're praying for people at the altar. One lady sitting next to him saying, hold on. The other one saying, let go. Hold on and let go. Let go of everything that's in you. Hold on to God. Because his timing is always perfect, right? His timing is always, I'm finding that out. His timing's perfect. His timing's perfect. And it's the proper time. He says the proper time, that's you and me, that's followers of Christ, at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Remember, back in the story, even though the battle belonged to the Lord, they had to be prepared. They had to get ready to go into battle. They had to march into battle to see what God was going to do. So we have to continue to plant seeds. We have to continue to till the ground. We have to continue to water the seeds. We have to continue to do the things God's called us to do, and then watch him win the battle. Watch him win. We will reap a harvest. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Even in the midst of our whatever change is happening, whether it's good or bad, whatever is going on, we have to continue to do good. We have to continue to do what God has called us to do. Even when we don't feel like it. Thank God that we don't live our lives by our feelings. I thank God for our feelings. I thank God for our emotions. But I'm glad that I don't live by those. I'm glad that I'm able to say, God, this is how I'm feeling, but this is what I know. So help me line my feelings up with what I know your word says. And then God begins to work in our lives. Then he begins to do, and we begin to reap what we have sown. So even in the difficult times of our life, the transition, the seasons of change, the times of transition, we have to continue to do good. We have to continue to sow, continue to do good, even when we don't feel like it. I'll share this one last thing with you. Do you know that sometimes preachers don't feel like preaching? It's like the old joke, the guy says, I do not want to go in there, I do not want to go to church today. All those people, I do not want to go. And the lady and the wife says to him, you have to go, you're the pastor. Sometimes we don't feel like preaching, but we do it anyways. You know why? Because we trust the one, right? And we know that God has a word. And I will share this. One of the worst sermons I ever preached. It was so bad, I was bored. That's how bad it was. Because what happened is that morning, or that evening, as I'm leading worship, playing piano, and God spoke to me and said, I'm going to do something. Watch what I do tonight. So I start trying to figure out what God's going to do. So we keep playing, and I keep playing, and nothing's happening. Everybody's just kind of like, oh, we're tired right here. So worship ends, I get up to preach, and I'm like, God, you're going to do something. When are you going to do it? And I start preaching this sermon, and I'm like, oh, it's terrible. I think it was Psalm 51 or something. I don't know. It was bad. And I was like, I can't wait for this sermon to end. This preacher needs to shut up. And I was the guy preaching. I'm telling myself, can you stop, please? And when I was getting ready to end the service, a man came in drunk. And God said, even when your sermon's bad, I'm a good God. and he got saved, filled with the Holy Spirit, went home sober, and he now pastors that church. He's been there almost 20 years as the pastor. Yeah. So God is going to do, the battle belongs to God. So we've got to keep doing the good because we're going to reap in God's time.